Hello, BookTube, and welcome to June on the Range. At long last, one of BookTube's favorite events, a BookTube event designed by Michael K. Vaughan to celebrate Western novels. We had a great philosophical type discussion about Westerns yesterday. I got a lot of great emails that I'm still going through. Sorry if I haven't answered yours yet. I got a lot of emails yesterday, just a massive amount, about what Westerns are, and what some of their drawbacks are, some of their blind spots, some of their bad parts, just as a genre. Uh, I mentioned in that video something that I thought would be more controversial than it is. Than it's turning out to be anyway. I mentioned in that video, maybe nobody watches my video. Maybe that's the answer right there. I mentioned in that video that I have found that a lot of the problems that people have been talking about Westerns, both on BookTube and not on BookTube, problems with gun violence, problems with racism, racist depictions, problems with sexist depictions, that sort of thing. I mentioned in my video yesterday that I didn't think a lot of those were very prevalent in most Westerns, going back a long way. Not the novels. I think they're more prevalent in TV and movie depictions than they are in anything else. Maybe comic books. But certainly, there have been thousands and thousands of Western novels written in the last 100 years. Because that's what we're largely circumscribing Westerns, right? I know I spend all of June on the Range every year trying to hem Westerns in, but surely we can describe Westerns as taking place roughly in the span of 100 years. From the opening of the West in the immediate wake of the War of 1812, which Boston won for you, you're welcome, to the end of Western expansion, the 48 states, the lower 48 states, statehood, from wall to wall, from ocean to ocean. That's about 100 years. So surely, it's a little bit less than 100 years. Surely that is when Westerns take place. You can have a Western theme type thing before that. Louis L'Amour does a few Sackett novels like that. And you can have a Western theme story after that, like the whole career of Vladimir Murtry. But the actual six-gun Westerns that we're talking about take place in that time period, when there is a frontier, when there are wild lands, when there is a lack of law. One of the key elements of the Western novels that we're reading in June on the Range is a lack of the law, where you have outrun the law. It's back east, and you're not there anymore, so you're the law unto yourself, or someone else is. But I made that point yesterday that those elements don't seem as bad in the Western novels that I've read. There have been 10,000 of them, so I haven't read a sample. But I've read a lot of them. Thanks to June on the Range, I've read a lot of Westerns in the last 3 years. They seem a lot less prominent to me in the novels than their critics would have you believe. And I was expecting that a lot of people would start quoting chapter and verse and disagreeing with that. A lot of you have been writing to me saying, I've always thought that. I read, Elmer Kelton or Max Brand or whatnot, and sure, it's there sometimes, but hardly prominent at all. I thought that was fascinating. That philosophical discussion was fascinating, and it is ongoing. It is ongoing in my inbox. But the number one question that I asked yesterday in that philosophical discussion was, can we agree that, for want of a better term, we're all adult readers here? I shouldn't use that term because young readers can be really good readers. I should instead say that we're experienced readers. Can we agree that we're experienced readers and we can just, now that we've acknowledged that subject, we can just put it aside and enjoy the heck out of June on the Range? And oh my God, no matter whether or not people were disagreeing with me on one thing or another, one particular book or another, everyone was in agreement with me that yes, please, can we just enjoy this event? I've been looking forward to it all year. The last thing I want you to do is grim it up. Message received. I agree completely. So I'm just going to jump in. And when I encounter a flagrant example of something like that, I'll call it out, as we all should. But there's a lot to enjoy here. So let's saddle up and do a whole month of Westerns, starting with this one, The Kelly Man, by Will C. Brown. I know nothing about Will C. Brown. This is one of those old paperbacks that should not stand up, but this one did. Somebody folded its cover before me. I didn't do that. But this held up just fine. I could read this 10 more times, I bet, before it fall apart on me. It's from 1964. It's just a little 35 cent paperback from 1964. I'm assuming that Will Brown fits the mold of almost all June on the Range authors that I'm encountering. I'm assuming that Will Brown is a pseudonym for a guy who churned out 200 books. But maybe I shouldn't assume that, because this is my first novel for June on the Range 2024, and it was remarkably good. Remarkably, notably good. I have spent time in the trenches of June on the Range, and a lot of the books I've read are not good. This was very good, including that rarest of rarities, no insult intended to our beloved genre of choice this month. It was also extremely well written, and that is rare. That is really rare for Westerns where you've got some hungover guy sitting there in his wife beater at the edge of his SRO bedroom, pounding out something on a typewriter with a roaring bourbon hangover for the $45 that an editor will give him if he can have a manuscript done by Friday. A lot of these Westerns were written in conditions not functionally different from what I just described, and that does not lend itself to good prose. I have no idea the conditions under which Will Brown wrote this book, but boy, oh boy, did I enjoy it. And it is the story of Saul Kelly. The main character is Saul Kelly. He is the eponymous Kelly man, who left a do-nothing, know-nothing, go-where-nothing town in Texas 6 years ago. The town is named Grand Flat. We're told nothing much ever happened in Grand Flat, except for that 1 week in May 1878 when the Kelly boy came back to town, and nothing much has ever happened in the years thereafter. The village was one of those arrested Texas townsite mistakes, languishing in the creviced brushland beside the Del Rio El Paso Supply Road. Grand Flat and its scattered lookalikes might have been someone's fond hopes once when the lumber was freighted west from San Antonio, but most of them were destined to droop stunted forever like mesquite transplanted without enough taproot. The four winds came in their seasonal turn to buffet the settlements with fry and freeze and the red grit dusts of spring. In time, the town looked as pointless in existence as the land about it, and the people grew to look like the town. Grand Flat sees nothing. Nothing ever happens. But once upon a time, 6 years ago, the Kelly boy, not the Kelly man at the time, the Kelly boy, Saul Kelly, left town. It wasn't any kind of catastrophe that drove him away. It wasn't a dramatic departure at all. He decided one day to pick up his saddle and his meager belongings, mount a horse, and tell his uncle, I figured I'd look around for a bit. He isn't content just to sit in Grand Flat. And now, 6 years later, he is returning. The beginning of the book gives us a narrative gimmick that we've seen before. It's a popular thing with Western novels, where they will introduce their cast of characters by having them all see the same thing. So the narrative focus shifts from one to the other. So-and-so was the first one to see the Kelly man returning. So-and-so was the first one to see the rider come to town, didn't recognize him, didn't know the Kelly story. So-and-so knew him well, his uncle knew him well, sees him come back. And the narrative shifts from one person to another so that it's a nice, comfortable way to get the cast described. And when the Kelly man now, who is different, he is older, of course, but there's also something else about him that's different that you see on this cover, and that is described in the book right away. He has a scar extending from his hairline almost to the tip of his chin. Well, somebody asks about it in the opening pages of this novel, as they do, because they know him. He says that he went through a fence wrong. Went through a fence carelessly. You know that's not true. In a Western novel, there's no such thing as a trivial scar. But when he returns to his old home, his old homestead, there's a young boy in his old room. Doesn't know who this stranger is. It's been 6 years. And the stranger, the Kelly man, Saul Kelly, asks him, in that closet over there, is there still a pile of books? And the boy says, no. No, I don't. What kind of books? What are you talking about? And Saul Kelly says, well, they were history books, adventure books. And the boy says, no, they're not here anymore. What use of books anyway? And Saul Kelly says, well, I might have put an egg in you to make you want to get out of this place. See the broader world. The clear implication being that they did for him. But he's being cagey about his past. And he asks his uncle, did you send me a note? The uncle says, well, I've never been one for writing, and I didn't know where you were. So no, I never sent you any note. But he did get a note. something is going on here. A mystery is going on here. In fact, Will Brown really skillfully layers mystery upon mystery upon mystery. There's a mystery in this novel involving treasure, and also a mysterious horse of spotty provenance, and Saul Kelly himself is a man with mysteries. We often are told in bad writing videos that there's only one story in all of writing: a stranger comes to town. Of course, that's not true, unless you're ignoring nuance and variation, which is just what you want to teach writers to do. But one of the absolutely indispensable story archetypes in the Western novel is a man returns. It's not necessarily a stranger comes to town, although he has had enough experiences to make him a stranger, even to his nearest and dearest. But a man returns for some reason. The reason will be a mystery. Usually it'll have many mysteries associated with it, and that is true here. Oh my, that is true here. Will Brown foreshadows a lot. He's really good at it. He's a really good writer. I don't know that I've ever read him for June on the Range, but I was utterly caught up in this book right away. And, to be fair, I would have been caught up in it even if it had been written by somebody who was really bad. I've read a few mystery authors for June on the Range that I thought were really bad. They really were that guy, that hungover guy typing, leaning over a manual typewriter with a bourbon bottle right by his shin, periodically getting himself through writer's block. I've read a lot of these things that really did read that way. This does not. There are obviously... The Kelly man is not only looking for answers, but he has people looking for him. And gradually the book develops all of those things very skillfully. The one element of this book that I thought was the weakest element is what I usually find the weakest element in all of the dime store. This is definitely a dime store Western, even though the 60s is a little late for that. The one element that I always find the weakest in most of these dime store mysteries is their gesture at heterosexuality. They have to have a girl. There has to be a girl in there. The guy has to win the girl, or be boyishly embarrassed and afraid of women. They don't usually have much of a role other than that. There is a main character in this book. She's a minor character at the beginning. She grows in the background. That's very skillfully done. To the point where, at the midway point of the book, you know that she is going to be the girl for Saul Kelly. You don't know if it's going to happen, but you know that it's not going to be anyone else. That it's going to be her or nobody. And the way that they come together at the end, tragedy brings them together at the end of the book, but in a very good way. It's a very John Ford scene where they realize that they're going to spend their life together. There's a very John Ford scene there that's very well done. So my first book for June on the Range was a slam bang success. I thought this was great. Not just the plot and the action and the pacing and the dialogue, but the writing itself. The writing itself is so good. I want to give you just an example of that. I promise I won't do this with every June on the Range. I don't want to make June on the Range videos 30 minutes long. But let me just read you just a scene setting. This isn't an action scene. If anything, I would say that Will Brown is the weakest at his action scenes. But on most nights, this time of spring, the town turned comfortably quiet in its lonely isolation. The long benediction of a soft May twilight finally would fade out, and the drape of a vast night would come to tuck in the miles of despondent greasewood and thorny mesquites. Lamps turned shaded window panes into reminders of habitations, when the houses themselves dissolved from view. After night closed down, sounds traveled far in the thin, clean air. There weren't many, nothing much astir to make sounds. Windmills working, the crickets and the dogs, but these were a fixed part of the night silence. Barn doors closing where people went about after-supper chores, often the far-off singing and chords of a guitar from the backyard in a Mexican settlement, and mixed with that, until late, musical laughter. Grant Flat, if the night was not Saturday, had the world to itself alone, in a corner of the county a day's journey wide, and it was a waste of fancy to vision a world outside any different. Later, but too soon after spring, would come the sapping heat and drought of summer, with the universe baking and giving off a hot flannel red smell. Red dust would blow. Tempers of men, longhorns, irritable rattlesnakes, and coyotes bold for water would shorten, sometimes flare out in violence. Old feuds might boil up into the Saturday fist fights in the street or saloon alley, occasionally a killing. These would furnish the town with a summer subject to gnaw on clean through the winter. This was the Grand Flat as remembered by Saul Kelly. But May evening peacefulness flew apart this Tuesday night. Another author, a less confident author, would not have given that much time to how peaceful it is. They would have gone to the piece blowing apart. So I don't. I know that a lot of you have read more westerns than I have. I know that a lot of you are more experienced on this genre than I have. I don't think I've read Will Brown before. I really enjoyed this book. So, The Kelly Man is a success. My June on the Range 2024 is off to a good start. That is wonderful. So that was my Western for tonight. I will throw another one on the pile tonight, or for last night. I'll throw another one on the pile tonight, and we will resume the trail tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.